So when I graduated high school, I was 17 years old. I enlisted in the Army the next week just to get out of that town.
The snow was red with blood. The German offensive tore through Belgium like a spear, and the men holding the line knew what happened to those who surrendered. Malmedy had made that clear. In the middle of this chaos, one 19-year-old American private stayed behind on a narrow bridge armed with little more than a bazooka and sheer defiance. He wasn't a commander, he wasn't famous, and he wasn't supposed to live through that day.
They said tanks cannot operate in this terrain, and the most you're going to get is a few infantrymen infiltrating. Well, about 4 o'clock the next morning, here come German tanks bumper to bumper.
Yet somehow, Francis Sherman Currey held the line. But why did German SS troops, known for their ruthlessness, hesitate when they encountered him? Here's why Francis Sherman Currey was the scariest soldier of World War II. A world on fire. December 1944. Europe was supposed to be winding down toward the end of the war. Allied forces had liberated France, pushed into Belgium, and were preparing to cross into Germany. But Adolf Hitler had one last move, a massive counteroffensive meant to split the Allied front, capture the port of Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace on German terms. It became known as the Battle of the Bulge, the largest and bloodiest battle fought by U.S. forces in World War II. The Ardennes forest, usually quiet in winter, exploded with gunfire and artillery. Over 200,000 German troops, backed by 1,000 tanks and assault guns, slammed into unsuspecting American units. The weather worked in their favor. Fog and snow grounded Allied aircraft, cutting off the support troops had come to rely on. It was chaos. At the spearhead of this assault were the 1st SS Panzer Division. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were battle-hardened Waffen-SS troops, infamous for their brutality. In earlier campaigns in Russia, the men earned the nickname Blowtorch Battalion for their scorched earth tactics, burning villages and leaving nothing alive. They carried that same ruthless reputation into the Ardennes. On December 17, 1944, that brutality came into full view at the Malmedy massacre. A convoy of American soldiers from the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion surrendered to Panzer Division men near Outnumbered, Belgium. They expected captivity. Instead, they were herded into an open field and gunned down. 81 Americans were executed in cold blood. Survivors who played dead later crawled away and reported the atrocity. The massacre shocked the Allied command. For the troops on the ground, it was a chilling message. Surrendering wasn't an option. As the German advance pushed deeper into Belgium, American units were scattered, isolated, and low on supplies. Many were cut off entirely, facing tanks with little more than rifles and machine guns. Some abandoned their posts in desperation. Others dug in, knowing there would be no reinforcements coming in time. In this hellish landscape, where survival meant holding ground against overwhelming odds, one young soldier from New York prepared to make his stand. He wasn't a commander or a tank ace. He was a private, a replacement, a teenager who'd barely seen combat. And in the days following Malmedy, he would do something that made German soldiers stop in their tracks. Something that would turn Francis Sherman Currey into one of the most unforgettable names of the war. Early life. Who was Francis Sherman Currey? Before the war turned him into a legend, Francis Sherman Currey was nearly invisible. He wasn't from a military family or a privileged background. He was born on June 29, 1925, in the quiet town of South Fallsburg, New York. His life changed early. At just 12 years old, he was orphaned and placed in a children's home. There was no roadmap to greatness for him, no early sign of the warrior he would become. When he enlisted in the U.S. Army at 17, it wasn't out of glory-seeking. Like many young men of his generation, they wanted to serve. He trained hard, learning the basics of infantry combat, rifle marksmanship, anti-tank weaponry, and small unit tactics. These were standard skills. What wasn't standard was how quickly he absorbed them, retaining technical details that most recruits struggled to master. By September 1944, Currey was sent to Europe as a replacement in the 30th Infantry Division, nicknamed Old Hickory. This division had already built a reputation as one of the hardest fighting units in the European theater. They'd stormed through Normandy and held off counterattacks in the Netherlands. Currey wasn't joining green troops, he was stepping into the ranks of veterans who had seen some of the war's worst. For a 19-year-old who'd never fired a shot in combat, this could have been intimidating. But Currey's fellow soldiers quickly noted his composure. He didn't panic, he followed orders, he learned. Still, there was nothing about him that screamed hero. He wasn't tall or physically imposing. He wasn't an officer. He didn't make speeches or draw himself to attention. To anyone looking at him in December 1944, he was just another replacement, another name on the roster. But that's what makes his story even startling. In just a few months, this quiet young man would be thrust into one of the most chaotic moments of the war. He wouldn't just hold his ground, he would change the course of a battle. And he would do it with the level of calm and aggression that no one saw coming. The boy who had grown up with nothing was about to take on the most feared soldiers in Europe and in Malmedy. They would learn his name. The Malmedy Assignment. The Malmedy Assignment. By December 20, 1944, the German offensive had carved deep into Allied lines. The Ardennes, once thought to be a quiet sector, was now a killing field. Town after town was falling to the relentless push of German armor and Waffen-SS infantry. Amid this chaos, Malmedy, a small Belgian town near key road junctions, became a crucial defensive point. Whoever controlled it would control the flow of reinforcements and supplies. If the Germans captured it, they'd have a direct path to further disrupt the Allied defense. The 30th Infantry Division was tasked with holding this ground, and one of its key positions was a bridge on the outskirts of Malmedy. It wasn't just a bridge, it was a vital crossing that, if taken, would give German armor a straight path to roll deeper into Allied territory. That's where Private Francis Sherman Currey was posted on the morning of December 21, 1944. It was bitterly cold. Snow and ice coated the roads, slowing vehicle movement, but giving tanks and infantry natural cover in the fog. Visibility was low. Communication lines were stretched thin. The men stationed there knew that if a German force pushed across that bridge, they wouldn't have much warning and they wouldn't have many options for retreat. To make matters worse, the Malmedy massacre had happened only days earlier. Word had spread fast. Captured Americans weren't being spared. The men on that line understood one thing clearly: if the Germans came, they would be fighting to the last round. Currey was there with other infantrymen and supporting anti-tank crews, but the German advance had already been brutal. Anti-tank positions had been smashed. Units were withdrawing or being overrun. The enemy wasn't just coming, they were coming with armor and momentum. And then, without warning, it began. German artillery opened up, pounding the area around a bridge, the air filled with the scream of shells. Soldiers dove for foxholes and ditches. It was the classic prelude to an armored assault: soften the defenses, then roll in the tanks. Currey didn't panic. He watched through the smoke and debris. He spotted movement, a German tank emerging from the haze, edging its way toward the bridge. Then another. Most soldiers would have stayed in cover, waiting for orders. Currey didn't. He grabbed his Browning automatic rifle and aimed at the tank commander visible in the turret. One clean burst. The tank slumped out of sight. The tank rolled forward anyway. Currey knew this was only the beginning. The bridge wouldn't hold by itself, and if no one acted, Malmedy would fall. The day everything broke. December 21st, 1944. The bridge at Malmedy was about to be swallowed whole. The artillery didn't stop. It intensified. German shells ripped into American positions, throwing dirt, snow, and bodies into the air. It wasn't random fire. It was deliberate, a textbook prelude to armor rolling in for the kill. Through the haze, more tanks emerged. The first one Currey had engaged was just the spearhead. Behind it, at least 3 more tanks and supporting infantry were advancing. These weren't scattered units. This was a coordinated SS push. Currey knew what that meant. If they took the bridge, the entire defensive sector would collapse. And in that moment, something clicked. He wasn't going to wait for reinforcements. There likely were none anyway. He wasn't going to hunker down and hope for survival. He was going to fight. Currey sprinted from his position through open ground under machine gun fire, heading for a barn where a bazooka was stored. He wasn't alone. Another soldier helped him load it, but Currey was the one who stepped up to fire. He aimed at the tank and squeezed the trigger. The bazooka round slammed into the tank, hitting near the turret and disabling it. Smoke hissed from the impact as the vehicle rolled back, retreating out of the line of fire. 1 down. But that wasn't the end. 3 more tanks were coming. For most soldiers, that would have been the moment to retreat. But Currey wasn't like most soldiers. He spotted an abandoned American anti-tank position nearby. It was risky. German fire was raking the area. But Currey ran toward it, searching for anything he could use. He found it. Anti-tank grenades. Crawling and sprinting through bursts of enemy fire, he got close enough to lob the grenades at the advancing tanks. With the first grenade, he disabled 1 tank. With the second, he forced another tank to pull back, and by the third grenade, the tank was abandoned entirely by its crew. In a matter of minutes, 1 lone private had halted an armored advance meant to crush an entire defensive position. And still, Currey wasn't done. While he was fighting the tanks, he spotted 5 wounded American soldiers stranded near a disabled half-track. They were pinned by machine gun fire, unable to move. Without hesitation, Currey crawled across the road under enemy fire, dragging each man to safety. Once they were clear, Currey returned, not to retreat, but to fight. He climbed onto the wrecked half-track, commandeered its mounted .50 caliber machine gun, and laid down a relentless stream of fire, forcing German infantry to scatter. By the time the smoke cleared, the Germans had been pushed back. The bridge was still in American hands, and Francis Sherman Currey was still standing. But the battle for Malmedy wasn't over. The Germans would come back, and the quiet 19-year-old from New York wasn't finished showing them just how dangerous one soldier could be. The impossible stand. The impossible stand. Francis Sherman Currey should have been dead. By every calculation, a lone private with a Browning, a bazooka, and a handful of grenades should not have been able to stand against a coordinated SS armored assault. Yet, for reasons that would puzzle even the enemy, he did. The bridge was still contested. The Germans weren't retreating completely. They were regrouping. Infantry dug in, taking up firing positions. Tanks edged cautiously, avoiding the killing ground where Currey had wrecked their advance. But Currey wasn't just holding the line, he was dictating the fight. After clearing the bridge with anti-tank grenades, he repositioned himself, crawling back toward the disabled half-track where he'd mounted the .50 caliber machine gun. With the weapon stabilized, Currey unleashed controlled bursts at German infantry, pinning them down and cutting off their support for the remaining tanks. It wasn't wild shooting, it was precise, deliberate suppression. The Germans responded with heavy fire. Bullets chewed into the wreckage around him. Mortar rounds landed close enough to rattle his teeth. Any normal soldier would have abandoned that position. Currey stayed, and when the machine gun overheated and jammed, he didn't stop. He switched to his Browning automatic rifle, pouring fire into German positions until they were forced to withdraw deeper into cover. But the SS weren't done. They had tanks still capable of pushing through, and if they coordinated one more strong assault, the bridge and the men behind it would fall. Currey made sure that didn't happen. Moving with an almost mechanical calm, he scavenged Panzerfausts, German single-shot anti-tank weapons left behind by retreating infantry. Using the enemy's own weapons, he stalked the field, firing at the remaining armor with unnerving precision. The effect was devastating. Crews abandoned their tanks rather than risk being blown apart. The advance sputtered and died. By this point, Currey had done more than hold his ground. He had single-handedly broken the momentum of an SS offensive, a feat that would normally require a coordinated squad or an anti-tank team. And he did it under constant fire at just 19 years old. When the shooting finally stopped, the bridge was still in American hands. The 5 wounded men Currey had rescued were alive, and the German assault had been blunted. It was over, at least for now. For his actions that day, Currey was later recommended for and awarded the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration the United States can bestow. But even medals can't fully capture what happened at Malmedy.
This wasn't simply one soldier doing his duty. This was one soldier redefining what was possible on a battlefield, and the truth of why the Germans hesitated, why they pulled back instead of overwhelming him, wouldn't become clear until much later.
A hero nobody saw coming. When the smoke finally cleared, the bridge at Malmedy was still in American hands. German armor had retreated. The wounded men Currey had dragged to safety were alive. And somehow the quiet, wiry private who had manned that position was still standing. To the men who witnessed it, the scale of what Currey had done was hard to comprehend. He had acted alone with no orders, improvising in real time. He had faced Waffen-SS troops, men infamous for their ruthlessness, and forced them back. It wasn't luck, it wasn't chance, it was deliberate, calculated action that had stopped a German advance dead in its tracks. In the immediate days following the battle, Currey's scurry spread through his unit. He wasn't a loud or boastful man, but the men around him knew what they'd seen. Word reached his commanders quickly. By March 1945, his company commander had formally recommended him for the Medal of Honor, citing his extraordinary heroism and decisive action in the face of overwhelming odds. On July 27, 1945, near Reims, France, Currey was presented the Medal of Honor by Major General Leland Hobbs, commander of the 30th Infantry Division. The official ceremony followed in August after the fall of Berlin. But the honors didn't stop there. In addition to the Medal of Honor, Currey received the Silver Star, Bronze Star, 3 Purple Hearts, and Belgium's Order of Leopold. His own division commander wasn't the only one impressed. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, reportedly told Currey that his actions at Malmedy had shortened the war by 6 weeks. A staggering assessment of the impact one soldier could have on the battlefield. Yet despite the accolades, Francis Sherman Currey didn't act like a war hero. He didn't seek the spotlight. After the war, he joined the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Albany, working quietly as a counselor to other veterans. He later ran a landscaping business and eventually worked in hotel convention planning in Myrtle Beach. He never bragged. He rarely spoke about what happened. To the world, he was a decorated soldier. But to those who faced him at Malmedy, he was something far more unsettling. The Waffen-SS who met him on that bridge didn't just lose tanks or men, they lost their nerve. But why? Why did hardened German soldiers hesitate against a single 19-year-old private? Because Francis Sherman Currey didn't fight like one man. On that day at Malmedy, he created the illusion of a larger force. The rapid, precise way he moved, switching positions, scavenging weapons, and striking from unexpected angles made the enemy believe they were walking into a coordinated ambush. They weren't. It was just Currey. But in war, perception can be more powerful than reality. Most infantrymen stayed pinned down under tank and machine gun fire. Currey did the opposite. He ran at the enemy. He fired bazookas at close range. He used captured Panzerfausts, weapons designed for German hands, and turned them against their owners. This wasn't reckless courage, it was psychological warfare. To the Germans, his actions didn't make sense, and soldiers fear what they can't predict. That day, he fought like an entire unit. Currey's ability to transition between roles, anti-tank specialist, machine gunner, rescuing wounded men, created confusion. The SS didn't know how many Americans they were really facing. Was this a squad? A platoon? Reinforcements? They couldn't tell. That uncertainty slowed their advance and forced them to retreat. While panic was spreading amongst the Germans, Currey was aggressive but calm. In a firefight where any wrong move meant instant death, he acted with surgical precision. That kind of composure under fire is unnerving to any opponent. It makes them wonder, what does he know that we don't? Suddenly, the enemy was the ones feeling scared. German SS troops thrived on intimidation. Massacres like Malmedy were designed to terrorize their foes. But at that bridge, they were on the receiving end. Currey's aggression, his refusal to retreat, and his effectiveness with improvised weapons made them hesitate. In combat, hesitation is fatal. This combination, adaptability, fearlessness, and psychological manipulation, made Francis Sherman Currey terrifying to face. He wasn't a berserker blindly charging tanks. He was a hunter, calmly dismantling one of the deadliest fighting forces of the war piece by piece. That's what separates him from other heroes of World War II. He didn't just survive the impossible, he made the enemy believe they were outmatched by a ghost. That's why Francis Sherman Currey wasn't merely brave, he was the scariest soldier of World War II. A lone private who shattered the confidence of an elite SS division and left them wondering what exactly they had just faced. Legacy of a Ghost. When Francis Sherman Currey left the battlefield, he didn't bring the war with him. Unlike many Medal of Honor recipients who became public figures, Currey chose a quieter path. After leaving active duty in 1946, he dedicated his life to helping others. There were no speaking tours, no memoirs, no fanfare. Yet his legend only grew. The men who had been there knew what they'd seen, a one-man stand that saved lives and stalled a German advance. For them, Currey wasn't just another soldier. He was the reason they made it home. His recognition extended beyond medals. In addition to the Medal of Honor, Silver Star, Bronze Star, 3 Purple Hearts, and Belgium's Order of Leopold, Currey's story became part of military study programs, showing future soldiers how adaptability and psychological dominance can change the course of a battle. He even became the first Medal of Honor recipient to be immortalized as a G.I. Joe action figure, introducing his story to younger generations who might otherwise never learn his name. His real-life actions were also adapted into scenarios for video games like Medal of Honor, turning his battlefield improvisation into teachable moments of tactical brilliance. But Currey himself never saw it as extraordinary. In his mind, he was just doing his job, protecting his fellow soldiers, holding his ground. He passed away on October 8, 2019. The quiet, unassuming man who had once single-handedly stopped a Waffen-SS advance died peacefully in New York, far from the frozen bridge where his legend was born. His story is more than a tale of wartime heroism. It's a reminder of what makes a soldier truly terrifying to his enemies. It isn't rage, it isn't brutality. It's the ability to remain calm, adapt under pressure, and turn fear back on those who would wield it. On that day in Malmedy, Francis Sherman Currey became something the Germans couldn't understand, a lone ghost who fought like an entire army, and that is why his name still carries weight. Not because he wanted to be remembered, but because no one who faced him could ever forget that he was the scariest soldier of World War II. Do you think a single soldier like Francis Sherman Currey could have this kind of impact in modern warfare today? Or was he a product of a different kind of war? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching.